واتل ما أوحي إليك من كتاب ربك لا مبدل لكلماته ولن تجد من دونه ملتحدا.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We continue inshallah ta'ala with the tafsir of Surah Al-Kahf from the tafsir of Imam Sa'di rahimahullah, and we reached ayah number 9 from the surah, as you see here in the screen. يقول الله عز وجل: أم حسبت أن أصحاب الكهف والرقيم كانوا من آياتنا عجبا إذ أوى الفتية إلى الكهف فقالوا ربنا آتنا من لدنك رحمة وهيئ لنا من أمرنا رشدا فضربنا على آذانهم في الكهف سنين عددا ثم بعثناهم لنعلم أي الحزبين أحصى لما لبثوا أمدا. The translation of the verses: or have you thought that the companions of the cave and the inscription were among our signs a wonder? When the youths retreated to the cave and said, Our Lord, grant us from yourself mercy and prepare for us from our affair right guidance. So we cast a cover of sleep over their ears within the cave for a number of years. Then we awakened them that we might show which of the two factions was most precise in calculating what extent they had remained in time. So this is basically the story of Ashabul Kahf, the people of the cave, which is the surah is named after them, Suratul Kahf. And this is one of the signs of Allah, one of the great signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Miraculous thing happened to these individuals as a result of their steadfastness and firm belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we'll go with what is mentioned in the tafsir, word by word, inshallah ta'ala. There are many things, of course, to be mentioned about it, and many things are mentioned in the books of tafsir, some authentic, some not authentic, but this is what we will refer to here, inshallah ta'ala, in this tafsir. So he says here, rahimahullah, وهذا الاستفهام بمعنى النفي والنهي. هذا الاستفهام, this questioning, الاستفهام, is in the meaning of النفي. النفي is to negate something, والنهي is to forbade something. So, and then he explains what it means. So the ayah, am hasibita, or do you think, or do you count that the people of the cave, the companions of the cave, wal-raqim, and the inscription, as we'll talk about what al-raqim is, they were from the wonder ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the questioning here for two things, an-nafi wal-nahi, to negate something and to forbade from something. So what is that? أي لا تظن أن قصة أصحاب الكهف وما جرى لهم غريبة. That means do not think that قصة, the story of the people of the cave, وما جرى لهم, and what happened to them, غريبة, something strange, على آيات الله, something to be strange or awkward from the ayat of Allah, from the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وبديعة في حكمته. And Al-Badi', if you remember, one of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the creator of all things without a previous example. So Badi'atun, when something is never, there is a like of it before. In the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَأَنَّهُ لَا نَظِيرَ لَهَا وَلَا مُجَانِسَ لَهَا. There's no like of the situation or the story of the people of the cave. And mujanis. Al-mujanis, al-mujanasa is when something is relevant to one another, something in the same level of things. بل لله تعالى من الآيات العجيبة. So do not think that this is, something that is no like of it whatsoever, or this is such a, unique matter. Because to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, min al-ayat al-ajiba, from the amazing ayat of Allah, signs of Allah, al-ghariba, the strange things, ما هو كثير من جنس آياته, which is lots of it in abundance from the kind of these ayat and signs from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, في أصحاب الكهف, in the people of the cave, وأعظم منها, and greater than what's mentioned. So فَلَمْ يَزَلِ اللَّهُ يُرِي عِبَادَهُ, which means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala kept on showing his ibad من الآيات في الآفاق, from the ayat of Allah, from the signs of Allah in the horizons, in what you see all over the universe, وفي أنفسهم, and in their own selves, ما يتبين به الحق من الباطل, what made the حق, or makes the حق clear from the falsehood, والهدى من الضلال, and guidance from deviation. He says, وَلَيْسَ الْمُرَادُ بِهَذَا النَّفِي. So the nafi here, do not think that the story of the people of the cave is something that is, beyond the power of Allah, or something that is unique. That means, it's something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not able to decree. So that's why he says, وَلَيْسَ الْمُرَادُ بِهَذَا النَّفِي عن أن تكون قصة أصحاب الكهف من العجائب. It is not meant by this to say that, not to say that the story of the people of the cave is not one of the amazing and the wonders of matters. No, but rather it's from the ayat of Allah al-ajiba. It's from the strange and the wonders of ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, no doubt. But what is meant by the questioning or the negation here, وإنما المراد أن جنسها كثير جدا. What is meant is that the kind of these types of ayat are so many. So فالوقوف معها, so to stand by it, that meaning that you only look at this ayah and that's it, and there's nothing more beyond that. وحدها في مقام العجب, in the state of being amazed or something amazing happen or wondering. والاستغراب, and something that is very strange to happen. نقص في العلم والعقل. If you think that this is the only act of miraculous and wonders that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreed, then this is a deficiency and weakness in your knowledge and in your reason. بل وظيفة المؤمن, because وظيفة المؤمن, the job of the believer, التفكر بجميع آيات الله, to reflect, to think about all of the signs of Allah, التي دعا الله العباد إلى التفكر فيها, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala invited the ibad, the slaves of Allah, to reflect upon it. فإنها مفتاح الإيمان, because these are the keys of الإيمان. وطريق العلم والإيقان, and the path of knowledge and certainty. So the ayat of Allah, there are so many endless signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and these signs of Allah, when someone think about the signs of Allah, this is the mean to one's knowledge and one's certainty. He says, وإضافتهم إلى الكهف الذي هو الغار في الجبل. أصحاب الكهف, this is the إضافة, the attachment of these people to the cave, which is, what is the cave? الغار في الجبل, the opening in the mountain. So this is the cave, as we know, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala create these mighty creations, the mountains, and you would find in the mountains there are caves. So because they stayed in the cave for, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned. وَالرَّقِيم, what is al-raqim? Al-raqim comes from raqam, or raqam, something written. So al-raqim, as they say, inscription or so, it refers to, he says, أي الكتاب الذي قد رقمت فيه أسماؤهم, the book that their names have been written in it, رقمت. In it, their names, وقصتهم لملازم, and their stories, لملازمتهم له دهرا طويلا, because they stayed in this kahf, in this cave, for a long time. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned some of what happened to them مجملة, in general. ثم ذكر قصتهم مجملة. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned it مجملة, in general. فصلها بعد ذلك. Then he mentioned some of the details afterwards. فقال إذ أوى الفتية, when the fitya, أوى means sought refuge. Al-iwa is when someone seek refuge in something. So إذ أوى الفتية أي الشباب, the young ones, that's what الفتية means, إلى الكهف, to the cave. He says يريدون بذلك التحصن والتحرز من فتنة قومهم لهم. They seek, or they want, as a result of that, التحصن, to be in a fortified place and to be protected, والتحرز, and which is shielding themselves, من فتنة قومهم لهم, from the fitna of their people to them. Because they wanted their people, they wanted them to disbelieve in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so they were afraid that the people would torture them. That becomes a fitna for them, that they might find themselves weak and confirming what their disbelieving people of their town are upon, to save themselves from the severe punishment. So إذ أوى الفتية إلى الكهف. فقالوا ربنا آتنا من لدنك رحمة. So they said, our Lord, give us from you من لدنك رحمة, mercy from you. أي تثبتنا بها. That means to make us steadfast with it, with your mercy. وتحفظنا من الشر, and to protect us and to guard us from the evil. وتوفقنا الخير, and to guide us to do what is good. So فقالوا ربنا آتنا من لدنك رحمة. And you see how beautifully it's mentioned, in general terms like this. Nakira, that means all kinds of mercy. Mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestowed His mercy upon someone, then there's no need for you to worry about that individual. So they know how to ask. And one of the great means, or in one's life, is to know how to ask and to know what to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for. So they asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for rahmah, mercy from Him subhanahu wa ta'ala, تثبتنا, as you see, وتحفظنا وتوفقنا, to give them firmness, to protect them, to guide them. وهيئ لنا من أمرنا رشدا. And هيئ لنا, that means prepare for us from our affairs رشدا, something that is upright and something that is guiding. Which means, as he said, أيسر لنا كل سبب موصل إلى الرشد. That means make it easy for us every path, every mean that would lead to a rushd or guidance or uprightness. وأصلح لنا أمر ديننا ودنيانا. And rectify for us our matters of religion and matters of worldly matters. فجمعوا. So as a result of that, جمعوا, they brought both together, بين السعي والفرار من الفتنة. They brought it together by mentioning the sa'i, the determination, and to go forward and to flee away from the fitna. إلى محل يمكن الاستخفاء فيه. So they fled from the fitna to a place where they can hide in it. They mentioned that. وبين تضرعهم وسؤالهم لله, and also with تضرع, the extensive dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make their affairs easy for them. وعدم اتكالهم على أنفسهم على الخلق, and them not relying upon themselves, nor they rely upon al-khalq, or the creation of Allah. And this is the best of the affairs of the person, that a person would do the physical means, take the physical means. These fitya, these young men, they did not say, well, we believed in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they're afraid of their people to deviate them away from the truth. But they said, well, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decree for them to harm us, then they're going to harm us. They did not say that, but rather they took the means. And the means, the only means that they had is to, when they found a cave, to be in that cave till Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. They have no plan. It's just they're fleeing with their religion so that their religion is protected. So they took the physical means and they made the tadarra'. They turned to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with so much devotion in their dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make things easy for them. So that's why فَقَالُوا رَبَّنَا آتِنَا مِن لَدُنْكَ رَحْمَةً. After they made the iwa, إِذْ أَوَى الْفِتْيَةُ إِلَى الْكَهْفِ, then after that فَقَالُوا رَبَّنَا آتِنَا مِن لَدُنْكَ رَحْمَةً. Oh Allah, give us from you rahmah, mercy from you. وَهَيِّئْ لَنَا مِنْ أَمْرِنَا رَشَدًا, and prepare for us from our affairs rashada, something that is upright. So then he said, فَلِذَلِكَ اسْتَجَابَ اللَّهُ دُعَاءَهُم. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepted their dua. وَقَيَّضَ لَهُم مَا لَمْ يَكُنْ فِي حِسَابِهِمْ. قَيَّضَ لَهُم, that means He decreed for them and made attached for them what they never thought of. They never counted for it to happen whatsoever. قَالْ فَضَرَبْنَا عَلَى آذَانِهِمْ فِي الْكَهْفِ. When they entered the cave, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَضَرَبْنَا عَلَى آذَانِهِمْ. الضرب is when you seal, when you hit on something. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did that to their ears, meaning they slept in the cave. أي أنمناهم. So فضربنا على آذانهم, that means we made them sleep. And as you know that when you close your eyes, you can't close your ears. So one of the things that makes people awake or wake the people up is the sound, the noise. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made them not to be disturbed by anything and made them sleep. سنين عددا, counted years. وهي 300 سنة و9 سنين, as it's mentioned later, that it's 309 years. وفي النوم المذكور, and in the nawm, the sleeping that is mentioned, حفظ لقلوبهم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protected their hearts من الاضطراب والخوف, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protected their hearts from the al-khawf is the fear, and al-ittirab is when someone is disturbed, going back and forth. Is this going to happen to me? Is this going to, like this? وَحِفْظٌ لَهُم مِّن قَوْمِهِمْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protected them from their people. وَلِيَكُونَ آيَةً بَيِّنَةً, and for it to be a clear sign from Allah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made them sleep as a way to protect them. And they were protected by sleep, even though sleeping is the weakest state that a person is in. You cannot protect yourself when you're sleeping. But this is by the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He protected them by making them sleep. ثم بعثناهم, then we resurrected them, meaning أي من نومهم, we made them awake from their sleep. لنعلم أي الحزبين أحصى لما لبثوا أمدا, to know who among the two groups أحصى, they comprehended how long they stayed. So he says أي لنعلم أيهم أحصى لمقدار مدتهم, for us to know who among them they count the measure of their time that they were in the cave. كما قال تعالى وكذلك بعثناهم ليتساءلوا بينهم, as he said subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this is how we sent them or resurrected them, to give them life again after being asleep, for them to ask among themselves. الآية وفي العلم, he says, and in the knowledge بمقدار لبثهم ضبط للحساب, and in the knowledge of how long they stayed is making the counting very accurate. ومعرفة لكمال قدرة الله تعالى, and to know the perfect qudra and power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وحكمته ورحمته, and His wisdom and His mercy subhanahu wa ta'ala. فلو استمروا على نومهم, if they continue to be in sleep, لم يحصل الاطلاع على شيء من ذلك من قصتهم, none of what's mentioned above people would get to know from their story. So this is by the great wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made things in such a way, and no one knows and comprehend the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when we go back and we see Am Hasibita, this is a question to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam and to the reciter of the Quran, that even though Ashabul Kahf and the amazing fitna that they and trial that they went through, this was with regards to their religion, to hold fast to their religion and to not to be deviated. As we will see the different types of stories in Surah Al-Kahf with the different types of fitan that people get or they face in this worldly life, and how to protect oneself from these tribulations. And whether Ar-Raqim is a specific book or so, as many of the ulama, they mentioned many things, which is the fact that they stayed in this cave for so many years. كَانُوا مِنْ آيَاتِنَا عَجَبًا, this is from the amazing ayat of Allah. So the verse states that this is from the amazing ayat of Allah, and also states that this is not the only ayat from Allah, because there are more and more signs from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether it's physically or religiously. And when these fitya, with regardless of the details how they got to know each other, and they were hiding their iman, their faith, knowing that their people would cause so much harm for them, and what they feared for themselves the most is not that they will be physically harmed and they fear for their well-being, but rather they were afraid that the people would torture them, would punish them, that it might be a fitna or a trial for them to leave their religion, for example. They wanted to hold fast to the deen of Allah. And that's why they took the means to flee with their religion, to flee and to protect their religion, and they made dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make them receive the rahmah, the mercy from Allah, and to have ar-rashad, which is the uprightness, the guidance that would make the person know exactly what to say and what to take and what route to seek and things of that nature. So then when these two means are established, then the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that no one can oppose it get established. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made them sleep many, many years, and then He gave them life again, as we always see this in our life when we sleep and when we wake up. It's minor death and it's minor also resurrection. So ثم بعثناهم, and al-ba'ath is the resurrection. This is after a person sleeps and then a person wakes up. And who's the one that makes people sleep? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will, then kun fayakun, for it to be, and it becomes. There's nothing difficult for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And to know who among the two parties know how long they stayed, because of the debate of what's mentioned in the verse, how many are they, how long they stayed, and things like this, because this was a very strange thing and a miraculous thing, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it for people to see and the benefit and to learn from it and how to protect their iman and to be steadfast upon the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We'll stop here inshallah ta'ala because time just exceptional today inshallah. And if you have any questions, please go ahead, but let me read it first from the beginning. He says وهذا الاستفهام بمعنى النفي والنهي أي لا تظن أن قصة أصحاب الكهف وما جرى لهم غريبة على آيات الله وبديعة في حكمته وأنه لا نظير له ولا مجانس لها بل لله تعالى من الآيات العجيبة الغريبة ما هو كثير من جنس آياته في أصحاب الكهف وأعظم منها فلم يزل الله يري عباده من الآيات في الآفاق وفي أنفسهم ما يتبين به الحق من الباطل والهدى من الضلال وليس المراد بهذا النفي عن أن تكون قصة أصحاب الكهف من العجائب بل هي من آيات الله العجيبة وإنما المراد أن جنسها كثير جدا فالوقوف معها وحدها في مقام العجب والاستغراب نقص في العلم والعقل بل وظيفة المؤمن التفكر بجميع آيات الله التي دعا الله العباد إلى التفكر فيها فإنها مفتاح الإيمان وطريق العلم والإيقان وإضافتهم إلى الكهف الذي هو الغار في الجبل والرقيم أي الكتاب الذي قد رقمت فيه أسماؤهم وقصتهم لملازمتهم له دهرا طويلا ثم ذكر قصتهم مجملة فصلها بعد ذلك فقال إذ أوى الفتية أي الشباب إلى الكهف يريدون بذلك التحصن والتحرز من فتنة قومهم لهم فقالوا ربنا آتنا من لدنك رحمة أي تثبتنا بها وتحفظنا من الشر وتوفقنا للخير وهيئ لنا من أمرنا رشدا أي يسر لنا كل سبب موصل إلى الرشد وأصلح لنا أمر ديننا ودنيانا فجمعوا بين السعي والفرار من الفتنة إلى محل يمكن الاستخفاء فيه وبين تضرعهم وسؤالهم لله تيسير أمورهم وعدم اتكالهم على أنفسهم وعلى الخلق فلذلك استجاب الله دعاءهم وقيض لهم ما لم يكن في حسابهم قال فضربنا على آذانهم في الكهف أي أنمناهم سنين عددا وهي 300 سنة و9 سنين وفي النوم المذكور حفظ لقلوبهم من الاضطراب والخوف وحفظ لهم من قومهم وليكون آية بينة ثم بعثناهم أي من نومهم لنعلم أي الحزبين أحصى لما لبثوا أمدا أي لنعلم أيهم أحصى لمقدار مدتهم كما قال تعالى وكذلك بعثناهم ليتساءلوا بينهم الآية وفي العلم بمقدار لبثهم ضبط للحساب ومعرفة لكمال قدرة الله تعالى وحكمته ورحمته فلو استمروا على نومهم لم يحصل الاطلاع على شيء من ذلك من قصتهم. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us benefit from what we heard. First of all, the attendance code is آياتنا عجبا آياتنا عجب. طيب بارك الله فيكم. We'll stop here inshallah and hopefully things are clear and if it's not clear please ask questions inshallah next time when we meet inshallah. بارك الله فيكم وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.